Thanks, Nicole. And I want to give my special thanks to Corpus Call to Action and CFC for convening this very timely and much needed forum on, I think, what is one of the main issues facing our church into the future. My presentation is on equal opportunity for leadership decision-making. I'm going to spend some time talking about context, then I'll give a little bit of overview of who are some of the women in leadership now, nationally and internationally. We'll talk a bit about futuring, and then start to address what are some of the responses we can make given the situation that we're in now. So first, context. I think we have to recognize that right now the church has conflicting teachings about women. We have a teaching that women are equal, but we cannot exercise that equality because governance in the church rests only with the ordained. And by definition, women cannot be ordained, and therefore, as many have said before me, we cannot participate in the decisions that affect us directly. Bottom line is the complementarity model translates to men are equally given, male celibate men are equally given to make the rules, and women are equal opportunity to obey them, okay? So, and this applies not only to women, because it applies to all lay people are excluded from church decision-making. So, second big idea, which has been said many times, but I'll say it again, it bears repeating. The inbred, monarchical, clerical system, I believe, is very bad for the church. And even despite all of our organizations have been working for many years to integrate women and married men via ordaining women and married men, in fact, that is a good thing in one sense because it will broaden the perspectives of decision makers. But it will not address the fatal flaw of monarchical clericalism in which governance depends on the whim of the Pope or of the bishop, regardless of gender, regardless of married state. This is the governance model we have. So, for example, Francis's reform to decentralize via the Council of Cardinals or via his work to empower the national bishops' conferences, trying to return them to the power they had immediately after Vatican II, all of that could be reversed by the next Pope. So essentially, when you look at this sort of really big switch that we're experiencing with Pope Francis, it depends on the whim of who the male is that's in charge. Okay. So we have a governance model that's badly in need of checks and balances, a system of checks and balances. And this leads to my conclusion that we need to change in canon law so that all the baptized have opportunity to participate in governance in the church that is more than advisory, but substantive. Now, I know this is pie in the sky and into the future, but I couldn't talk about this out of the context that we happen to be in, because this governance context is what is creating many, many of the problems that we face regularly. Okay, other big context statement. And even after we achieve this idyllic governance model in which all the people of God participate meaningfully in decisions that affect all the people of God, there will still be bad decisions. There will still be mistakes. There will still be sin. It's human nature. There is no perfect system, but at least we'll have a structure in which everyone is involved in making a mistake, you know? And of course, another way to talk about that is as a learning organization because we learn, but that's another talk. Okay, so now we'll look at a glance of women's leadership today, because even in the imperfect system that we have now, women are exercising significant leadership, albeit within the context of a stained glass ceiling, okay? And a recent study published by Crooks, the online Catholic news magazine, in an article in mid-May by Michael O'Loughlin, showed that of 3 high-ranking jobs open to lay people in Catholic dioceses across the United States, which would be chancellor, chief financial officer, and school superintendent, only 1/3 of all of our 197 dioceses have these positions filled by women. In fact, another 35% of 197 U.S. dioceses have no women at all in any of these influential positions. So that's of concern. Then if we look at the U.S. Catholic charitable organizations, we're doing a lot better there, I think, because as someone mentioned earlier, Sister Donna Markham has just been named the first female head of Catholic Charities USA. We have Carolyn Wu, who's the president of the Catholic Relief Services, I think exercising very prophetic leadership because the organization has just been under attack by a very vicious right-wing organization, the Lampet Society, in attacking one of their chief executives who was not Catholic, in a committed gay marriage for many years. Catholic, under Carolyn, were considering how to address this, and he spontaneously withdrew. And in the closing statement, Carolyn made a point to criticize public and decry the attack on him. And last but not least, one of my favorite women leaders in Catholic organizations is Sister Carol Keehan with the Catholic Hospital Association. And her leadership and the leadership of the Catholic Hospital Association literally changed the lives of millions of U.S. people when the organization disagreed with U.S. bishops over the Affordable Care Act and very courageously supported it. And many attribute their stands and the stands of the sisters through the Leadership Conference of Women Religious and others for helping legislators decide that, yes, it was okay to vote for the Affordable Care Act, Catholic legislators. And many believe that that is one of the tipping points that led to the attack on LCWR and U.S. Women Religious. And of course, you have to remember, it was Catholic nuns who started the Catholic Hospital Association in this country with a mission to serve people. Anyway, just an aside, Sister Carol was invited to speak at an April 28th conference at Rome's Pontifical University Antonium. So I guess she's not a bad girl of the Bible anymore. So you can hope for that. Let's take a look now at the International Church. At the Vatican, we have the percentage of women employed is now around 19%. In 2014, that translates to 391 women, up from 288 3 years earlier, and up from 194 in 2004. Among them, but again, it's 19%, it's 1 out of 5. Among them, 41% had university degrees and worked in professional positions such as archivists, historians, journalists, but many work in service jobs at the Vatican supermarket, post office, or museums. There are only 2 women in the Vatican that serve as undersecretaries. The 2 highest ranking are not heads of dicasteries, not secretaries, not prefects. They're like 3 levels above them, but we're glad that they're there. Flaminia Giovanelli works at the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. She's a laywoman, and Sister Nicoletta Spazzati is a member works at the Congregation for Consecrated Life. Most recently, within the last 3 weeks, and I think it was on his way home from South America, Francis said there are no plans to appoint women to head dicasteries, which are the main governing bodies of all the committees in the Vatican. Because many had said maybe, if they create a new one on lay people, we could have a lay woman. But again, the thing that we have to remember, what's governing all of this is the canons that say only ordained. So there are 2 obstacles here, one being that no ordained person is going to take orders from a lay person. A priest is not going to take orders from a woman, and the other one is a male oftentimes is not going to be accountable to a woman. So this is the structural thing we're dealing with. Another, though, positive sign recently is that an 8-member Vatican core group to help the Catholic Church fight against clerical sex abuse included 4 women, one of whom, Marie Collins, really led the charge in Ireland. She is a victim herself, and campaigning to protect children. 3 other women were Polish Prime Minister Hanna Suchaka, Baroness Sheila Hollins, a British psychiatrist, and the French child psychiatrist Catherine Bonnet. Cardinal O'Malley remains on the commission, as well as a male canon lawyer, Professor Claudio Papali, and an Argentine moral theologian and a German psychologist. Then we can't forget the incredible women theologians and leading thinkers. I won't belabor them too long because many of you know who they are. I think of course, Beth Johnson, Lisa Saul Cahill, Ivone Gabarra, Margaret Farley, Joan Chittister. Sister Sharon Ewart was just appointed the first woman president of the Canon Law Society of America. But again, even with these wonderful women who are helping shape the future, and I want to give a shout out to Sister Kate Kunstler, who's also doing, I think, really forging new territory in canon law, particularly around successful parish appeals. But again, we have to remember that these women theologians do operate under threat of censure, as Beth and Margaret have experienced, as well as Joan Chittister. So it's a mixed bag. Sister Mary Malone has just been named the first female rector of a pontifical university, which is a big deal. The other thing is the International Theological Commission. Of the 30 theologians who have been named who will serve a 5-year term, 5 women were named, which is the most we've ever had, 16%. Previously, there were 2. And again, I won't go through all of their names, but that's one step forward. The one step back here, the other person named from the U.S. is Father Thomas Wynady, who is the former executive director of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Secretariat on Doctrine. He is the one who, I would say, maligned Sister Beth Johnson in her book, Quest for the Living God, saying that she wrote things that she never wrote, never talked to her. So you have some real concerns when someone like that is appointed to an international commission when it's really documented. You can go online and see what he said, but what was actually in the book. Anyway, don't get me going. Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious that what we have is a pretty big, bright, bold, stained glass ceiling at work. And perhaps never was that more in evidence than the situation with Leslie Ann Knight, who was an incredible Zimbabwean woman, General Secretary of Caritas Internationalis, who was dismissed in 2011 after a wonderful 4-year term, huge support by her board, but was not approved by the Vatican, that suddenly decided that they were a public juridic person, and she had to have a nihil obstat, which means nothing objection to her continuing in that role. Her boss, Cardinal Maradiaga, I'm sorry, I don't say his name very well, was given the nihil obstat. She was not, and it led to a really huge ripple through the system. Caritas really is the umbrella organization for 165 Catholic relief organizations and development organizations all over the world. She had done a sterling job. The Vatican was trying to say, oh no, she did a good job, we're just going in a different direction. But in fact, they knew nothing about this until the last minute. It was secrecy right up until the bitter end, very similarly to the LCWR and apostolic visitation of women. I found out through LifeSite News, one of the more conservative internet sites, that what they said was underneath it is that Leslie Ann had supported the Canadian Bishops Organization, the Canadian Bishops Conference basically, who did an investigation after their research and development organization, the Canadian Catholic Organization for Development and Peace, had been accused of supporting abortion and contraception, okay? And the Canadian bishops themselves did an investigation of their own body, did not find substantive issues, Leslie Ann supported the bishops' conference, and because of that, she was removed. And so it was not only an attack on Leslie, it was also an attack on the national bishops' conferences all over the world. And in some ways, it was a setup for what later happened with Francis, because this was under Pope Benedict's reign, and I think that there were reverberations throughout the Catholic network. This is my own analysis, I might be wrong, but so anyway, this is how people are trying to survive in the current governance system, which is a dysfunctional system, all right? It has great concerns for the future because we see a growing disaffection of women. In 1987, 52% of women and 35% of men attended Mass weekly. Now, about equal numbers, 30% women, 30% men. And a more recent study found for the first time in any of these longitudinal studies, millennial Catholic women are slightly more likely than Catholic men their age to say that they never attend Mass. This is historic. Nevertheless, we have to give a shout out to the all millennial and Gen Next women and men here who are very engaged in church renewal and reform. Nicole, Ellen, Euclid, the Women Ordination Conference, Erin and Kate, the CFC women, Jen, Sarah, Future Church, certainly Jocelyn, Gina, Liz, our former program person, Dignity, Equally Blessed, Christina, Wynette. So, I mean, there's a lot of energy there. So here we are. We're in this thing. We've got the canon law. What do we do? How do we deal with the dysfunctional governance? Well, here's what some people did. Pope Benedict resigned, okay? We sort of hit the peak of dysfunctional governance. Pope Francis is working, for reform within a certain context. There are some women within this system who choose the path of prophetic disobedience and get ordained outside canon law, and that's the RC women priest folks. There are others who are working within the system that try to use canon law for their own benefit. And I think that was one of the key things that protected the women religious in the United States, because they didn't have to give all that information that the Vatican wanted. And canon law was protective, and they stood up and said no. It's also helping many appealing parishes who are being closed, vital, vibrant, solvent parishes right here in New York City, because they're on very expensive land. And many of those appeals are being led by women. We've had success. And once again, Sister Kate Kunzler is really forging new ground in canon law and rights of the laity there. While one can reasonably argue that women chancellors, CEOs, etc., participate in jurisdiction to a certain extent, but always in the context of the stained glass ceiling that excludes all of these wonderful lay people who are doing the mission of the church from jurisdiction. So, where do we go from here? Well, I love Francis's idea of making a mess, and so I think I want to encourage everyone to continue making the great messes that we're making in terms of calling for things that are controversial but need to be discussed in the church. I think the other thing I want to say is we need to recognize that women's leadership in church reform is in fact leadership in the church, and we can't deny that. I think of Barbara Blaine's snap. It was the mouse that roared, and it's leading to all kinds of repercussions. I have great belief that all the ways that all of our organizations are calling the system out on what needs to change is also leading to such repercussions. We have a great resource at Future Church called A Million Voices to provide resources for people who are being treated unjustly, and it sort of walks you through some things that you can do from canon law to organizing a base movement. Bottom line, it comes down to us owning our church, okay, and refusing to leave, okay? And that's how we're going to be successful, that's how we have been successful, and that's how we will continue. So I guess my message to Pope Francis, if I had to sum it up, is we're not going away. So you might as well deal with us sooner rather than later.